I think we're just going to make some stuff up. Here's the one thing we don't want to talk about today, Rob. Toothbrushes.
All right.
And I can tell by the expression on your face you have not heard the Eddie Guardado toothbrush story.
No.
You don't want to.
Oh, no. Is it the...
Yes.
Oh.
It's that one. That's the reaction. Yeah. Well, it's the Hasegawa toothbrush one. You haven't heard that one?
Oh, I have heard that
Yeah.
one.
He started telling it. Eddie was my last guest. By the way, let me do the official crapola here. I'm Jim Souhan. This is Souhan Unfiltered. You can find it at SouhanUnfiltered.com. Excuse me. You can also find it at Souhan-Unfiltered on iHeartRadio. You can subscribe through iTunes and have them delivered to your inbox. And just, I think there's a way to subscribe in a way that anything referring to a toothbrush will be kicked out of your inbox. It's the way it should be. My guest is Rob Antony, Twins Assistant General Manager, longtime employee of the Twins since about 86, 87. And we've both been coming down to spring training for a long time. Let me also quickly thank my sponsors, Kieran's Irish Pub across from Target Center, the local on Nicolette, which is a great Irish pub, and O'Gara's Irish Pub in St. Paul. Thanks for your support. So, Rob, we're not going to talk about toothbrushes because I had Eddie on the air the other day. He started telling that story, and I was like, no, don't.
No, I appreciate avoiding that one.
And the thing is, what's sad is I should have had Eddie at least save that story for the end because Eddie was great. He talked about growing up in Stockton, California, what it took to be a major leaguer, what it took to be a success, why he can be a good coach. He was great once we got past the toothbrush. But I think a lot of people are going to hear the toothbrush story and never again tune into one of my podcasts. I really can't blame them.
Nor can I. Did you happen to ask Eddie how he landed such an attractive wife?
Well, his line to me has, because I've been asking him that for 15 years now, his line to me has always been, I am an overachiever in life.
Yeah, he was an overachiever in life. That's a good way of putting it because it wasn't just with Lisa, but how that man closed games.
I don't know how
he had was incredible.
He landed a beautiful, intelligent wife.
Yeah.
Lisa's very sharp, and they have great kids.
She's done a great job raising those kids.
And and you know what? One of these days she'll get around to raising Eddie. And also, the kids are great. And so Eddie definitely achieved in the marriage department. And as a pitcher, I mean, remember, geez, Rob, mid-'90s, Eddie comes up as a left-handed starter, like 94 or whatever it was, 95. He's your top pitching prospect, mainly because he pitched well at Double-A. He comes up, and we all look at him and go, okay, short lefty, he throws 89. Well, how's this going to work? And it really didn't very well. And then all of a sudden, but he's the kind of guy who's willing to adapt. So, and TK liked his guts. So you guys put him in a limited role, and he does okay. And then you give him a little more of a role, and he does okay. You make him a lefty setup guy, he does okay. All of a sudden, he's an all-star closer. I have no idea how the hell that happened.
No, I mean, it has more to do with guts and a willingness to throw your stuff over the plate, challenge guys. Jeff Reardon didn't have great stuff either, but, I mean, he was fearless as well.
Mm-hmm.
He just attacked guys. But Eddie, you're right. Eddie was one of those guys that you don't want to use the term failed starter, but when you get sent to the pen when you've been a starter your whole career, it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he didn't pout about it. He went out and he became a very valuable left-handed setup guy, and all of a sudden he's closing games for us and doing quite well doing it.
He also told me a story. He said that told me that I was the person who let him know that he was going to be the closer because Gardy had his press conference. I asked Gardy after the press conference, who's your closer in 2002, and he said, Eddie. And I called Eddie immediately, and Eddie said, really? I said, yeah, Eddie, you're going to be the closer. Oh, you're full of shit. No, I'm serious. You're going to be the closer. And then Gardy called him, and he did the same thing. He said, really?
Are you sure?
Is there another Eddie Guardado around someplace?
You thought this thing was Gardy?
Good Lord. And for him to, and that's the other interesting thing. We're telling old-time stories here, but that's okay. Eddie and LaTroy, I remember the spring of 2002, Eddie, and that was Rick Anderson's first year as pitching coach. I remember not only was Eddie a project closer, but LaTroy Hawkins looked like he was on his way out of baseball, and now he's still pitching.
Yeah, he had a tough go as a starter, and he went to the bullpen, and I mean, he was closing for us, and he was struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was really struggling, but that guy persevered. He just kept on, and now he's a pretty good closer. And he got better with age. That group was very, very unique personalities, and I know they loved Rick Anderson. He did a great job with those guys.
Yep.
Each one of those guys, he convinced them that they could do it and they could succeed, and he'd tweak a thing here or there, and so he deserves a lot of credit there, and I think those guys would all tell you the same thing, that him showing the confidence in them, and TK and Gardy, the confidence in those guys, that was probably one of the biggest things for them overcoming their early struggles.
And you talk about that group. People always ask me why you're so nostalgic about a group of players who never won a World Series. It's not like 87-91 where you had the obvious, crowning glory. I always tell them, because that group was what I think professional sports should be about. They had a bunch of overachievers, and not without talent. Guzman was very talented. Torrey's very talented, obviously. But I thought they were a group of overachievers who loved playing together, who loved competing, and, getting the ALCS, that is an accomplishment.
Absolutely. And, if we were talking hockey, we'd say this is a group that's gritty. They're grinders. They're tough to play against.
Yep.
And that described that team. And what I always fondly remember is they put us back on the map. We had the 87 and 91, but we went through a terrible stretch, and we were looking at contraction and all those other things, and they were the guys who stood up and said, forget this. We're not going down without a fight. We've played together. We've succeeded together. They could tell each other anything they wanted. Nobody took it personally. Feelings might get hurt. Next day they were fine. It was, it's like your buddies in high school that you could say anything to, but you were battling together, and you were friends. You were tight.
And I still remember one day walking in to, I hope I'm putting the right levels up. I'm actually my own sound guy down here, which is really scary, as you probably have figured out already. I remember walking into a visiting clubhouse one day, and there was like Minkiewicz from the Florida guy, Florida Keys, and Mr. Fisherman, Koski, the goofy Canadian, Rivas, the quiet guy from Venezuela, and Guzman, kind of the flashy guy from the Dominican Republic, and all four of those guys are crammed into a love seat watching TV. 4 different countries, 4 different backgrounds, 4 different personalities, and sitting there like, the way you would expect a bunch of 8-year-olds after a baseball game to be hanging out.
And that was our United Nations infield.
That's
right there.
Exactly. You've been through all the good times here. You joined the team in time to see the 87 championship. You were here for 91, both those times in the PR department, and you were around during the resurgence of the early 2000s. And now you've gone through the rough years now. Again, a second rough stretch for you. What's your favorite team? What's your favorite player?
Oh, man, I'm not sure I could pick a favorite team, but I guess the fondest memory would have to be 91, just because I got married about 2 weeks before the season started, came down to spring training, was at every spring training game. The season started. I went on every road trip that year, was at every home game, so I didn't miss a game the entire year, regular season. Postseason, we win it all, and we go to the White House. We get a snowstorm in Minnesota, and the next day, November 1st, was my first day off since February 15th. So I was immersed in that thing, but we had a lot of good guys on that team, and I really enjoyed the Chili Davises of the world, and just a lot of guys. That was, Knobloch and Erickson's rookie years, and I mean, they were phenomenal. There was a stretch there where Scott Erickson could not be beat.
Yeah, I remember that.
He was on fire. We had a game in New York against the Yankees, and there was no score, and it was about the 6th or 7th inning. He's dueling with Scott Kamenicki, and I'm thinking, I almost feel sorry for Kamenicki because you're not going to win this game. Scott's not going to lose this game. He was so competitive, and he was pitching so well, and we won that game, and it was part of our 15 in a row. And so I guess just all the memories that year, and that would probably have to be my favorite year, and I was still in PR then, so being that close to that team and all those players.
Is it different now that you're in the front office? You spend a lot of time behind the scenes. You spend a lot of time in your office talking to agents, dealing with budgets, all those other things. Do you feel more separation from the team?
Not necessarily, because I take a lot of road trips with them, so right. I get a chance to talk with guys in the clubhouse during BP, all the different times that there's so much dead time in baseball that you get to the ballpark, and we'll spend a lot of time with the manager and coaches, and I'll also have occasions to talk with the players, and just even on buses, plane rides, all those types of things. So I don't feel disconnected from them, but it is different because in PR you're constantly going to the players, asking for things. You need things from them, asking them to do interviews, all the different things. Now it's a little different relationship when you're negotiating the contracts. I'm sure some people like me better than others, but that goes with the territory. So it's different, but it's still good.
Ever had somebody throw a fit in your office?
I don't think I've ever had anybody.
Besides Lavelle?
I'm not sure anybody's thrown a fit in my office, but there's always times when you have some disagreements, but I don't think I've ever really had a lot of confrontations with a player ever.
The easiest thing for any team to do in spring training, or any player or front office person in spring training, is to talk optimistically. It's what spring training is for, basically. But I found a slight difference this year. And then when I asked Terry, when I asked Dozier, when I asked Hunter, people like that, I mean, they aren't bashful at all about saying we need to be a playoff team this year. The Twins need to be a playoff team or contend, at least give themselves a chance. And there should be a World Series on the horizon. Is it weird to hear it said out loud, or is that kind of is everybody in lockstep when it comes to that thinking?
I don't think anybody outside of our organization would believe that when we say it. I'm sure they roll their eyes and say every team, there's 30 teams that are thinking World Series, postseason, playoffs. We believe it. We believe that we are much improved, not just because of some pieces that we added and some young players that are coming that we think are about ready to help us, but also some of the players that we already have on this club that we think will be better this year and take a step forward. Now, you have to be cautiously optimistic because there's always that chance when you have a guy like Santana and Escobar and some guys who really stepped up last year, they have to back it up, and we'll see what they do this year. If they do, we could have a good year. But I also look at guys like Nolasco, who I fully believe will pitch the way we expected when we signed him prior to last year, and I think he'll really have a bounce-back year, and I have a lot of confidence in the rotation that I'm not sure I totally had in the past. Last year I thought our rotation would be much better, and with the struggles of some people, it wasn't a lot better. So that was disappointing, that was frustrating, but this is a time of year, you're right, everybody's optimistic, and you're looking at the positives. Nobody's lost a regular season game yet, and I think it's really the time, Jim, where newspaper guys get to write about players being in the best shape of their lives, and they're ready to defend titles, and they're ready to win a spot on the club, and all those stories that when I get them in the clips every morning, I just go right past them and scan through, because after 25 years of reading the same thing and just changing the names, but it's the same stories. And that's one of the things about baseball. Everyone's gone through a long winter, especially in Minnesota. I don't think our winter was too tough this year compared to last year, but it's been cold, it's been snowy, and people are just ready for baseball and for summer to come back. It's the best time of the year, and everybody wants to be excited about it. But I do believe there is a little bit of a difference this spring.
By the way, I never write that someone's in the best shape of their life unless they can demonstrate that they are and that it applies to baseball. I hate those stories. I come down here, I just have a list of stories I will not do. And those are among them. Although the interesting thing is, you never know when you see guys in great shape in spring training, you never know whether that's a great thing or a terrible thing. I mean, I saw Knobloch, was it 96, I think? He showed up and he just had lost all the baby fat and he was completely ripped. Maybe he was finding chemical enhancement. Maybe he wasn't, whatever. He looked great, and he hits 341. And I think Paul Molitor also had something to do with that too, but he did have a career year. And then you see Marty Cordova, I think it was after his Rookie of the year, and I go out and spend some time with him in Vegas, and he's doing boxing workouts on a hard concrete floor. I go to his kitchen, and he's got stacks of creatine everywhere, out in the open. I mean, and not that it's illegal, but it's of dubious quality, And he ends up having a foot injury that year. I think it was directly related to working out like a boxer, and he was really never the same. So. To me, the key is, how did you get in shape, and does it benefit you as a baseball player? And then it might be an interesting story.
That's the thing. That baseball players, they're athletes, but they're made differently.
Yeah.
And we don't have many days off. It's a grind, so you need to be in shape. I mean, there's been guys like Boof Bonser comes in, loses a ton of weight, and he can't find his fastball either. You lose a fastball with those 40 pounds?
Yeah.
So he says, man, I got to go back to being heavier again. I pitch better. So it's a unique sport in that you don't have to have a world-class body to be a really, really good player and performer in the game. But I will say that if you get too heavy, you do run that extra risk of being injured.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we try and monitor with guys and try and explain to them, hey, look, you might not even be fat per se, but you're carrying extra weight, and that's not going to do you any good. So we're not looking for, world-class body, but we would like you to get in a little better shape, drop a little weight, just so that we can minimize the chance of injury.
Well, there was a time when you would go into a baseball clubhouse in spring training, and it looked like everybody had just gotten out of Gold's Gym for whatever reason.
Not our clubhouse.
That was always Kadyr's line. Is you think I'm taking PEDs? Let me take my shirt off. That'll prove that I'm not. But, you did have some guys come in who were very puffy, let's put it that way. And I look around your clubhouse this spring, and it's, frankly, you got a lot of bellies. There are a handful of key players who are carrying a little bit extra in the gut, and I don't know if that is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, some of these guys, that's just the way they're built and the way they function.
You go back to teams we had that won World Series. Chili Davis was ripped. He was in great shape.
Right.
And some other guys. And then some guys that I won't mention by name. They really didn't have to. They had beer guts, and there's a reason.
Because they drank beer.
Yeah, I watched them develop those beer guts. So, yeah, it's having a great body and being in great physical shape does not always translate. And when you look around at players, you got to be a good baseball player.
Let's get specific here. Kenneth Vargas has a rather large gut. He also has a large frame, and he hits the ball a long way. Is he the kind of guy you would, your organization would tell, hey, maybe a little more cardio, or is he the kind of guy you say, hey, as long as you're hitting the ball to the fence, we don't care?
He's a guy that we say, you know what, if you had a little better eating habits
and
snacking habits and habits off the field, you wouldn't have to worry about this.
Right.
And we'd like to see you drop 10 pounds because he's a huge man.
He is.
But 10 pounds, it's not a concern anymore. But let's drop it down and keep it in check there, because we don't want you to be one of those guys that, is hurt all the time or has to deal with that.
It's funny, too, is I lost a lot of weight recently, and it wasn't really changing my workout habits. It was just changing the stuff I eat. It was just cutting out crap and cutting out snacks and being a little more conscious. I still eat burgers and ice cream and stuff like that occasionally, but I just don't, it's not my normal diet. And I talked to Matt Burke after he retired, and, have you seen pictures of Matt Burke?
Yeah.
I mean, he's completely ripped, and he was your typical big, doughy offensive lineman before that, because he had to be.
Right. He was small by comparison.
Right.
As an offensive
lineman. Right. He was
lineman.
only 320 pounds, so he was as small as a modern offensive lineman. And now he's like 250, and you can see his abs. And I asked him, and he said, you cannot exercise your way into a certain amount of shape. It has to be diet at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a combination, and if you watch what you eat, it has to be a lifestyle change. You can't just say, the people who go on the fad diets, I've always contended, well, when you get off that diet, are you just going to put it all back on? Or
and they do.
Yeah, and you see that so often. So if you can just make changes in your diet and in your lifestyle, I think you have a much better chance to keep that off, and that's a challenge for us. I mean, the way it is when you're on the road and you're traveling all the time.
Eating late, eating crap.
Oh, man, and you go out and have a couple beers after the game or something, now you go to bed, and I mean, it's pretty easy to start putting it on.
Absolutely. I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. This is the thing about the podcast, too. We end up talking about diets. I mean, we always end up someplace I didn't expect to end up. Let's go all the way back to what you were talking about with Scott Erickson, and then later you mentioned Ricky Nolasco. Erickson was a big, strong, well-conditioned athlete. He worked really hard at it. He had guts. He pitched great for 91, even after he was a little banged up. And then his career really just was never the same after that. Was it that? And there are two theories. One is sinker ball pitcher, very hard pitch to maintain, and if you lose it a little bit, it straightens out and becomes a batting practice fastball. The other one is he just was never his arm was never completely healthy again. Do you have a theory of your own?
I really don't. That was one of the great mysteries for me, because he had enough stuff. He had the hard slider, and everything was so good in 91, and after that, it just wasn't as sharp. And it was inconsistent. There were nights he'd go out, he threw a no-hitter against Milwaukee, but, and that shows that he still had good stuff, but it was just inconsistent. And when you get the sinker up or when it's not sinking, you're going to a lot of balls in play. When you get a lot of balls in play, you have a high batting average against, and you just too many things can happen that you can't control, and I think that happened to him a lot. He struck out; his strikeouts were down after that, and more balls, put in play. resulted in more runs against, and I think he was the type of guy that could get frustrated. And
yes, he did.
He'd have to battle himself to try and get it in check, and a ball that on the ground that somebody doesn't get to that he thinks maybe they should have got to. I think he could get frustrated with that, and he had to battle some of those emotions, and it can be very easy for a pitcher to say, I should have given up 2 tonight. I gave up 6.
Right.
That's not my fault. Well, if you always want to put blame on someone else, and I'm not saying he did that, but it's easy for a pitcher to put blame on. It's the end result. You need to find a way. What's the solution? What can you do? You have to control what you can do and not worry about all those other things. When you get that, then you have somebody who's mentally tough and overcomes those obstacles.
With Nolasco, you guys signed him to what, in Twins history is a very significant free agent deal, a lot of money. He comes in, he did not pitch well at first. He ends up going on the disabled list. My theory, and again, I'm throw it out and see what you think. And he ended up not being a very popular guy. He wasn't very, he wasn't very media friendly. He kind of kept himself in the clubhouse. He kind of carried himself a certain way. And I think that helped contribute to the idea that, here's this guy who just isn't any good. My theory is he was trying to pitch a little hurt to begin with.
He may have been, and when he shut down and when he came back, he was much better when he did come back. And I also believe that he's a guy that it takes a little time before he trusts people, before he gets comfortable, and I think that's some of what you saw. I don't think he was really engaged with other players in the clubhouse. He hung with a few guys, but he's a single guy. He's a younger guy who, that's a little different lifestyle than some of the other guys who are married, and times have changed a lot. We have a team full of guys who, after games, they go back to the hotel, call their wives.
Yeah.
Might order a room service or just hang out and watch a little TV and go to bed, sleep in, get up, go work out in the morning, and come back, go to the ballpark. So it's a little different deal than it was 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think Ricky just needed a little time to get comfortable, and I've had some of the clubhouse guys saying, this dude's totally different this year than he was last year. He came in. He's in the best shape of his life, Jim. So
he actually does look much leaner this year.
He's down about 25 pounds.
Yeah, he looked a little puffy last year. He looks pretty lean this year.
Yeah, so I think he's taking this seriously, and as much as he wanted to pretend like it wasn't bothering him, I know it was bothering him last year. He was embarrassed. He was frustrated. He knew he was coming in, and we were expecting and counting on him to be a guy, and I think he dedicated himself to wanting to change that around, and I think we'll see a different guy this year.
I actually agree with you. I actually think the fact that you bring in Santana, who's reliable, and I think Nolasco will bounce back. Gibson should be, still on the upward swing. Well, that leads to a really interesting question here. I've gotten the sense, depending on who you talk to, you hear around the organization, you talk to some people and they make it sound like, okay, want Alex Meyer to be the 5th starter. It's time. Talk to other people who say, well, I can see Alex Meyer in the bullpen. You talk to other people who say, well, he might get beat out for the 5th starter spot, and if he does, he should go to AAA and remain a starter. Where do you think he is? Or what's your view of that position?
Too early to tell, to be honest with you. I think he needs to go out and pitch. He's in competition for the 5th starter spot. That's the only thing he should be focused on, we should be focused on. If that doesn't happen, then we'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. And
man, you sound such a management guy.
I'm trying to be realistic. This guy's got a good arm. Could he fit in the pen? Yeah, probably. He's got 2 plus pitches. He could go be Dellin Betances or something coming out of the pen. Wade Davis, that type of a guy. But on the other hand, what if he's able to do that for 6-7 innings? Then that starter is way more valuable than a guy who comes in and sets up for perk, for an inning 4 or 5 days out of the week, rather than, having a chance to be that front end starter, which we thought he's going to be. So, on the one hand, you could put him in the bullpen if he doesn't win the 5th starter spot, because that doesn't mean he's a reliever the rest of his life.
Right.
We've done that with Johan Santana.
Yep.
But on the other hand, if we think he's our 6th starter, there is some value to sending him to Rochester.
You're going to need 6.
Somebody's going to go down.
You're probably going to need 8.
Yeah. So why not have the guy that you think can do it ready to go? So there's a lot of different schools of thought. You're right, and we'll make that decision when the time comes.
One concern about Alex I've heard from at least one person is the concern that about him repeating his delivery. He's got a little bit of funky delivery. Do you think he can repeat it often enough to be a starter in the big leagues?
I think he can, but his arm does drop down.
Yeah.
And I think when he gets tired, his arm drops down, and when you start lowering your slot, you run the risk of injury as well.
Yeah.
So he needs to be careful of that. And, when we got him, that was about the way we judged him. This guy has a chance to be a front-end starter, and the basement of his ability is he could be a closer or a power setup guy. So what we're getting, we know this guy's going to be valuable on our pitching staff. In a best-case scenario, he's one of our top starters. In a worst-case scenario, he's a valuable guy out of the pen. So we're not surprised by anything, and we knew when you have a guy that tall, a lot of parts have to work together, and the arm has to work with the rest of the body, and sometimes they start rushing and all those things. But we believe those are mechanics that he can correct or that he can be consistent with.
Right. Bringing back Torrey and Eddie. Now, these are guys you knew before. Now, for me, it's like the greatest thing in the world. I mean, Torrey's my favorite guy I've ever covered. Eddie's right up there, maybe tied for first in terms of personality and honesty and competitiveness and all those things. I love it. How much did you have to do with those guys coming back, and what's it like for you to see them come back?
Well, I can tell you that it was unanimous when we talked about should we bring Torrey back, and we all agreed on everything he could bring to the table. And we also believe that he's got a lot to offer on the field still. I know you can look at all the metrics and, defensively he's not getting to as many balls, all those other things. There's a lot of things that can play a role. I mean, I think he had a tight hamstring and some issues last year for parts of the year, but he's never going to say that or talk about that or make excuses. But I just think Torrey's a guy that can help you offensively, but it's hard to put a price tag on when you watch Hicks and Buxton and these guys follow him around, even Arcia. He's in his hit group, and they watch the way he goes about his business. You can have all the coaches you want. We can talk to him. The coaches can talk to him. But when they have one of their peers and somebody that talks to them every day about what it takes to be a pro and to consistently do this, not only through a full year, but through a career, that's a whole different deal. So he brings a lot of intangibles. He wants to win. He believes we can win. And half of the battle is believing in yourself and believing in your team and believing in the guy next to you that, you know what, we're going to get this thing done. And Torrey brings that attitude to the ballpark. Eddie's a guy that, a lot of people, he's a character, but you know what? Who better to deal with your relievers and prepare guys to come into a game? He's been a setup guy. He's been a closer.
He's been a lefty specialist.
He's been a lefty specialist. And he knows what it takes, and he's also a good communicator. He's a guy that you can sit down and talk to, and he can put it in plain terms. He's not going to talk over anyone's head or anything else.
But on the podcast, he said the F word 82 times.
82?
Oh, I counted, yeah. I had a little pitch counter here. Sorry, I interrupted.
Okay. I didn't say that he didn't have a profane streak in him, but we won't even get into some of the other things, some of his other deals.
Believe me, we've spent enough time on that.
No, but I think Eddie can bring a lot to this club and provide a different perspective to some guys out in that bullpen that can be very helpful in preparing and knowing what they're coming into in a game, what to expect. You got a runner on first. Gerard Dyson's on first. He's going. Okay, so just be aware of that. No, you're going in to get a hitter out, but just know that you need to keep this guy close or 2 outs. Don't worry so much about him. You get the hitter out, we're out of the inning. Don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to think about that stuff. So when you have a guy coming in, that sometimes they have a lot going on in their brain. They're thinking about a lot of different things, but just to be reminded and sort of put in the moment of what you're going into, because a lot of times it's different every time they come in.
Right. Let's talk about Buxton. I've done a lot of stories on him. I followed him. I've been with him in Atlanta. I visited his family in Baxley. Obviously, you've seen him. I saw him in Fort Myers down here last summer. Well, the funniest thing I'll ever remember, I don't know if you've heard the story, but I get down here. I'm talking to Sano and Buxton, and they're nice guys. And I said, hey, for my photographer, I've already talked to you guys. For my photographer, it'd be great to see you guys what you do at once you leave the ballpark. And in the old days, it might have been go straight to a bar and drink 18 beers. But these are just they're kind of both country guys in their own way. Different countries, but kind of country. And he said, well, we go fishing. And we're like, oh, that'd be interesting. What, you take a boat out in deep sea? No, it's just pretty nearby. They go out to Daniels Parkway, pull to the side of the road and fish in the irrigation ditch. And Sano's pulling fish after fish out, and Buxton's not having such good luck. But I mean, think about it. Here, these guys make the big money, the signing bonuses. They're future superstars. You know, someday they're not going to be able to walk down the street without being bothered. And here they are on the side of Daniels, and nobody's bothering them.
You know what? And that's one of the things that I don't think people realize. Those guys are both really good kids.
Yeah.
They're good guys. They work hard. And the thing that sets them apart from a lot of players, they don't think about the pressure of who they can be or people are predicting. They want to be great.
Yeah.
They want to be great players, but they've also both been raised right. So they get along. They fit right in a clubhouse. And, you know, that's what I was curious to see, especially with Sano, was how's he going to fit in with everybody. He comes in, hey, you know, he just got $3.15 million. You can be the big man on campus, the big shot. He was never that way. Players were like, at first, looking the same way. You know, is this guy going to be full of himself or something? He wasn't that way at all. You know, and anybody who wondered if he was 16 when we signed him, if you met him, you knew. Because he was an immature kid. He was just a naive, goofy, immature kid who loved to have fun.
Yeah.
And he was laughing all the time, and that's the way Vargas is. And Buxton's a little more reserved and a little more serious and focused and all that stuff. But he's a guy who you can tell he was brought up right. He's a respectful, classy kid.
Yeah. And what I noticed about Sano, too, you know, I'm down here. It's middle of summer in Fort Myers, so it's steaming hot, just blazing hot. I know he's from the Dominican Republic. He's dealt with hot weather before, but still, it's hot, middle of the day. And, you know, he's out there, and he's had Tommy John surgery. He can't do much. So he sits on a bucket and fields 100 ground balls hit at him because he wants to develop. I mean, you know, he wasn't sitting around feeling sorry for himself. He wasn't taking advantage of the situation to go party or whatever. He did his work, and he went and hung out with Buxton.
Yeah, there's no question. It was a very frustrating year last year for both those guys because all they wanted to do was play and be on the field. They genuinely love the game, and they have a world of talent. So it's going to be interesting to see how those guys develop and what they turn into because they both want to be impact superstars in the game.
Well, tell me about Buxton. He has the year from hell with basically 3 different injuries, all caused by him, you know, diving for balls or going hard on the field. Where is he in his development? How much does that affect him? Are there any negatives? Or are there any positives?
Well, the negatives are he played in about 31 games last year, you know, so he really did lose a year of development, just like Sano did. So does it set him back? Yes. But the positive side is those guys are both 20, 21, 22 years old, not even. So I don't think it's a you know, career crippler by any stretch. And if it was going to happen, you'd probably rather have it happen now than you know, when they're knocking on the door and now they're set back and all that stuff. So it's frustrating for them, and it was disappointing for us and for our fans because had they both played all last year, I think it'd be a whole different scenario right now. Those guys could be, you know, in this camp right now with a legitimate chance to make our club had they continued to progress last year as they had before. And even when Buxton played, it's hard to he was never able to get in any kind of rhythm or, you know, and it was freak things, diving for a ball, sliding, you know, all these things. But the positive is it wasn't any major structural damage. You know, he dealt with some wrist things and all that type of thing. And I think he was frustrated because he just wanted to take that next step and be in the big leagues, you know, and so did Sano. So for them to keep all that in check and understand, hey, I'm not going to let this get me down or slow me down. But the reality is, it did. It probably pushed them back a year from where they would be.
I mean, they might have made it They might have made it to the big leagues at the end of last year,
there
August,
was a
September, whatever.
I think going into camp, we said if both these guys stay healthy all year, there's a chance you could see them by the end of the year.
Right. With Buxton, you know, Torrey when he was young ran into the fence every chance he got. Buxton obviously has hurt himself with some effort plays. Do you even say anything to him about that? You know, well, hey, maybe dial back in this situation. It's not worth losing you, or do you not want to curb that at this point?
I don't think you want to curb that. I think you want the guy to go out and play the game hard, play the game the right way, and he'll figure some of that out. Mm-hmm. He'll understand that, you know what, it running into the wall to catch this ball when we're down 8-1 or something.
Yeah.
You know, what's the point? I don't want to risk injury, that type of thing, and no one would even notice because most guys probably wouldn't even be close to that ball anyway. So but you never want to put in the player's mind that he's playing the game and you play to try not to get hurt. So that's when you do get hurt, when you're trying not to. So I think you just let him go, you let him play, and know that when he gets to the big leagues, you're not going to tell him that. So right. I don't see why you would ever want to plant that in his head.
This is what do you say to the? I'm speaking from personal experience here. Every time I write about Buxton or Sano, I get emails. Oh, we heard all this about David McCarty. We heard all this about so and so. It's like the fact that there have been prospects who have failed before in Major League Baseball seems to have turned a lot of Twins fans off to the idea that these guys could be and probably will be great. What would your answer be to that mindset?
I guess my answer on Buxton would be, how many players have we said are legitimate 5-tool players? And maybe his lesser tool out of the 5 might be power, and that doesn't mean he's not going to hit 20 home runs.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that when you have that skilled and that talented of a player, and we try and downplay it a little bit just because we don't want to put a ton of pressure on him, but I would just say, wait and see. And we spend less time talking about the potential and what this guy might do than a lot of other people. Baseball America, Baseball Prospectus, a lot of media, they look at, when they see this guy, it's like, wow, what can't he do?
Mm-hmm.
So he has special tools and skills that doesn't always translate to a great Major League player. We believe he has that, and we believe he has the makeup to realize his potential. And with Sano, he's not a 5-tool guy. He's not going to steal a bunch of bases. I believe he will be a solid defender. He's got plenty of arm, and he definitely has power, and I think he's going to be a good hitter. So I just see him as a middle-of-the-order impact bat.
Yeah.
And he has the mentality. He wants that. He wants to be up there with the game on the line. He's not going to back off or anything else. So, and he's a good hitter. He's not just a power guy. He'll take a good at-bat. He gets 2 strikes on him. He's not an all-or-nothing guy. So I really believe that he is going to be an impact guy. He's going to have times when he strikes out more than you'd like. There's going to be things that, he should be better at this or that. But I think the key is to keep in mind what he can bring to the table, and the things he can do are they're what you're looking for when you're trying to draw up that middle-of-the-order guy. And one of the things you want to stay away from is don't focus on what a guy isn't as good at or can't do, and just appreciate all the positives that he can do, and you'll be much better off, as will the player, because he'll feel understood, he'll be appreciated.
This might be a weird correlation. It just kind of came to me. Tell me if it's stupid, but I know you guys came very close to landing Miguel Cabrera out of Venezuela, and I think the Marlins swept in at the last minute and made a huge offer. Did that experience cause you to really go hard after a guy like Sano, just not wanting to miss that kind of a player again?
I don't know if that had anything to do with it, and you're right, you had to bring that up, unfortunately.
Sorry.
But, yeah, that was a very, very disappointing time for a lot of people in our organization because we loved Cabrera.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one of our coaches, Rudy Hernandez.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it was Rudy, I believe, is his godfather.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I got to check, and I might be wrong on that, Jim, but I think it was Rudy or Leon was our scout over there, Jose Leon.
Right.
One of the two was his godfather, or is his godfather, and he wanted to sign with the Twins, and we were in at $1 million plus, and the Marlins basically came in and said 1.8, but you can't shop it around. You taking it or not? And they got him, and that was the rest is history. But with Sano, it was everybody was trying to figure out. He didn't have the documentation to prove his age. Some teams were skeptical or concerned because he was such a big, strong kid at a young age. But Fred Guerrero, our scout over in Dominican, did a tremendous job. He got to know him. He got to know the family. He was convinced, and Mike Radcliffe did a great job as well. He was really driving this thing. And we basically went to Jim Pohlad and said, here's the situation. We'd really like to get this guy. I know we've spent our entire budget on our international and everything else, but we think this guy can be an impact guy. He said, go get him. And that was the end of it. We went, made the offer, got him, and we were absolutely thrilled.
Absolutely. I know I'm going to come back to you occasionally during the season, so we don't need to take this one too long. Let's do kind of the weird stuff I do at the bottom of the show just to mix things up. I know I talked to you about you. I think you were one of my first podcasts way back whenever the hell that was. So I probably asked you these questions now, but we've probably all forgotten the answer, so I can do it again.
I probably did too.
Favorite TV show?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Doesn't have to be just one either.
I'm a Person of Interest fan.
Oh, okay.
And I like NCIS Los Angeles. I like the cop shows, mystery shows, that type of thing. I would say those are probably up there, top of my list.
Favorite movie?
Slapshot.
Of course. How do I not know that one? Of course. Give me a favorite band or artist or album or song.
Springsteen.
Yeah, me too.
And you can't name one song. It's
No.
the whole compilation.
That's
Man's
the thing.
incredible. Him and the E Street Band, they're the best of all time.
You know, with Molitor as the manager, who used to go on tour with Springsteen, with Springsteen fans in the media, local media, with the Springsteen fans in the front office, you got to get Springsteen to play Target Field.
Hey,
you got to do it.
It has been asked for and suggested many times, and for whatever reason, it's not something he's doing, or the stadium tour that he's doing.
You go to Jim Polad and you say, "Listen, for $3 million, you know, I know
Make
we've already spent our budget, but for $3 million, we can make this happen, and it's just a one-time deal." I mean, how could he? You know, I know, and Jim Polad's buddies with Molitor. Molitor would lobby for it.
Oh man, would that be the best?
That would be the best.
Target Field.
It would be. You know what? Paul McCartney was great. It was an awesome concert. He did a great job, and I tried to tell people who thought that was a great show. Yes, that was a great show in the context of Paul McCartney being 70 years old and putting on a good show. Ain't nothing like a Springsteen show.
No,
just
and
not the same thing.
Hey, nothing against country. I like some country music as well, but a good old-fashioned rock concert at Target Field would be outstanding.
Unbelievable. And he's played Fenway and Wrigley and all those other places. He just isn't doing the stadium stuff right now. But maybe the best concert I ever saw in my life was Bruce at Nationals Park just 2-3 years ago or whatever it was. It was unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. I've seen him about, I think, 8 or 9 times now, and there's no such thing as a bad Springsteen concert.
That one year, I can't remember what year it was, 99 maybe, 98, whatever. I can't remember if Molitor was a coach or a player that maybe it was 99 or 2000 and Molitor was a coach at that point. I remember because of where Springsteen was in Florida during spring training, and he for some reason ended up in towns you guys were in. Well, obviously he played twice in Minneapolis. Saw him in Kansas City when the Twins were in Kansas City. I saw him like 7 times on that tour, and Molitor saw him like 14 times on that tour.
Didn't you and I go to Tampa?
We went to Tampa. Yeah. We went to Tampa, and you know what? I hate to say this. That was my worst Springsteen experience of all the concerts I saw that year because we had the worst seats.
Oh, those were awful.
We just I wanted to go and I got in late and I got bad tickets and you and I end up in the nosebleeds, and it's too bad because you don't need to be close, but you need to be close enough to kind of feel the energy. You can't feel like it's on TV.
The acoustics weren't great.
They were not. No, it was but we'll see him again before we die. And he's like Sid. He's going to live forever, so he'll be around.
God, I hope so.
Yeah. There are so many things I could say there. I'm just going to let it drop. Okay, and I always ask this question. It's a tough one, but I get great responses, which is why I keep asking it. Finish this sentence. I was wrong about. People give me the best stuff when I ask this.
Oh, man. There's so many things that go through my head, and I can't say most of them.
You're not going to be like Eddie? You're not going to make this like Andrew Dice Clay?
Unfortunately, Jim, there's been so many things I've been wrong about, and one of the keys to not letting people know you're an idiot is you don't admit to all those things.
You only have to admit to one here. Just one. It can even be a nebulous little thing.
Oh, man. Think of some of the players that really haven't panned out here in the last 5 years.
Well, the thing is, it doesn't have to be baseball. It could be anything else. But if you want to talk about players...
no, not really. Not really, because none of those are good memories when I was wrong about any of them.
What Terry told me, I think, as I asked Terry that question, and he said, I think it was the Mike Messina draft. It really bothered him that you guys did not just jump on a polished college pitcher of such obvious talent, and he feels bad about that one.
You know what my answer would be? I try not to think about those things and not dwell on what I was wrong about or things that I did that you really can't change. And I try and look forward and just learn from all those things to try not to repeat the same mistakes. But I'm not sure I can, off the top of my head, Jim, I apologize. I'm not sure I can really give you an answer to that one, because I've been really fortunate to have a lot of good things in my life and things that have gone my way. So I don't have any things that I really hang on to and that I'm frustrated and wish I could go back and really change this or that.
Well, it's funny because, I don't think our professions have much in common, but the one commonality between being in a big league front office and writing a sports column is you're going to be wrong. If you're paid to put your opinion on the line, and anybody who puts their opinion on the line in a public fashion is going to be wrong a certain percentage of the time. The only way to not make a mistake in these jobs is to not try, to not put stuff out there.
Yeah, and we tell our players the same thing. If you don't make any mistakes, you're not trying.
Right.
So I'm trying.
I'm trying too, and like you said, I try to get better every day and every year. I don't know if it's working, but that's certainly the goal here. Give me one good summarizing thought about spring training. Well, it can even be just the fact that you and I are lucky enough to come down to Fort Myers in February. Give me your favorite thing about spring training to wrap things up.
I think probably my favorite thing about spring training is the timing. And my body, after doing this for so many years, that my internal clock starts telling me it's time to go.
Yeah.
You go through all the different stages. You go through the free agent part of things. And then you go through the arbitration process. And all of a sudden it's Twins Fest time and the Diamond Awards and all that. When that's over, it's like, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah.
When are we going? You pack up and you get going. And we had a later start this year than most years. We have a later start to the season, so it just feels right. And when you get down here, it's man, this is some life. You look out and you watch them cut the grass here. It's just beautiful here and everything they've done. I guess that's one of the great things, especially about spring training too, is that there was a little bit more excitement this year to come down, knowing that all the renovations were done here, and I was excited to see that. We've got basically darn near a new stadium over the course of the last 2 years. This doesn't even look like what used to be Hammond Stadium. So I was really excited about that. But I guess just the weather, the new start of the season, and the optimism and the excitement that go with it.
The amazing thing is I didn't mind the way Hammond Stadium used to be. It was fine for me. It was functional. It was a good place to watch games, great access to the back fields. And it's so much better now. It's so much better. I've toured your minor league facility now on the other side, where you have language classes, you have tutorials, you have financial training, you have a great cafeteria for these guys. That's I think baseball has always lagged behind because baseball people tend to be such traditionalists. Now it feels like the correct century.
And you know what else is? For a long time, I think the thought of it's good enough.
Right.
It's functional. It's good enough. We don't want to just be good enough. We want to be the best. We want to be a great organization, top to bottom, whether it's facilities, whether it's personnel, and especially players. And now, like we talked about internally over the course of the winter, we've got a great field in Target Field. Unbelievable. One of the best in the game. Now I believe we have one of the best spring training complexes. We have no excuses. Now we need to get it done on the field, because that's what it's all about, and that's what you hope all of this adds up to.
Absolutely. Rob, as always, I appreciate the time. This is, as you know, Souhan Unfiltered. You can find it at SouhanUnfiltered.com, iHeartRadio, iTunes. Thanks again very much to my sponsors, the local Irish pub in Minneapolis, Kieran's Irish Pub in Minneapolis, O'Gara's Irish Pub in St. Paul. Yes, I like drinking beer, and yes, I am Irish. It's not much of a coincidence.
Do you have anybody that's a friend or a sponsor that's not Irish?
We're working on it, but let's say that the pattern has been established. This is a very different business model. Believe me, we couldn't do it without the sponsors, so I appreciate them very much. We'll be talking to you again, Rob, and I appreciate all the time. Again, SouhanUnfiltered.com. We'll be talking to you soon from Fort Myers.
Jim, I'm